Hi again, everyone. I'm Ollie Matthews. This is Refuge from Narcissism, and this refugee video is sponsored by contribution from Anonymous. And here's her story. Hi, Ollie. I want to continue supporting your channel, so I decided to send my story. I've changed the names in the story to remain anonymous. This is part one. Like most people, the story doesn't usually start with the parent narc, which in my case would be my father, but their parent and probably the ancestors before them. My father was the youngest of three. He had a brother and a sister. He was born in the late 40s. Boomer. Boomer. My aunt told me they were dirt poor for the first 10 or 12 years after they were born. Here's the problem. Boomers lie a lot. They always tell you they were so poor, they were so this, they had it worse than anybody, and they did better than everybody. So any stories you're hearing from boomers about how bad or whatever, they always take it with a grain of salt. The good and the bad. At some point, my grandfather opened a business and their wealth started to accumulate. My aunt, whom I have been close to most of my life, said she always thought she was adopted because of how much of an outcast she was in the family. My grandmother was very emotionally abusive to her. She said she could remember my grandmother giving away her dress when she was a little girl. She loved that dress, and my grandmother gave it to some other woman for her daughter. I don't remember her telling many stories, but I do know she married her high school boyfriend to get away from her parents. She said she was surprised when my grandfather paid for the wedding and threw them a reception. My grandmother always insulted my aunt's husband, and after 15 years, she said she finally started to believe my grandmother's insults and divorced him, even though he was a good guy. She married another man from another town, and the second husband was physically abusive to her. She finally got away from the second husband after 17 years. She told me that my grandfather used to hit my grandmother a lot, and I guess she followed this pattern. I remember my grandmother leave. So what the grandmother did, she saw, look, and this is what narcissistic mothers do to their daughters. They don't want their daughters to have a better marriage than they did. If they were getting beaten, they want to make sure you're with a man that's going to beat you as well. I remember my grandmother leaving my grandfather when I was very young, but she went back, and I don't remember seeing or hearing about any physical abuse problems after that. My uncle was the oldest of the three. I didn't see much of him in my youth. He would visit my grandmother during the day and sometimes in the summer, or if I had spent the night with her, I would see him. He would come in for lunch. I don't remember much interaction between him and my grandfather. He was an alcoholic most of his adult life, although he seemed sober when I saw him at my grandmother's house. He was polite to me, and every once in a while, my father would go to his house to visit, but those visits were very infrequent and probably had some purpose, like picking something up or dropping something off. My parents seemed to be the ones who took care of my grandparents the most. They took them to their major surgeries and appointments. Both had bouts with cancer, but recovered after surgery and lived for several years after. My father went with my grandfather on long-distance trips. We would visit them every Sunday. My mother, my sister, and I would stay with my grandmother when my father and grandfather were out of town. In addition to their house, they owned other small vacation homes, and we would take trips to these places with them at least once every year or every other year. My parents were not rich, but we were privileged with the backing of my grandparents. Braces were paid for, other major expenses were paid for, etc. I have some good memories of gardening with grandma, sitting on her porch, watching the birds, holidays, baking, etc. But I was my father's child. I was not my aunt's child. I'll try to make this part as clear as possible. In the earlier mid-80s, my cousin Andrew, who was my uncle's son, moved in with my cousin Arthur, who was my aunt's son. Andrew had problems with drugs and alcohol. Arthur did not have these kinds of problems. I assume he was just helping out while he was staying there. Andrew molested Arthur's stepsister. I think she was around 11 or 12 years old. I found out years later that there was evidence he probably did something to Arthur's baby daughter too. Andrew went to prison for this. My grandmother was extremely upset that Andrew was arrested and taken away, and she disowned Arthur, my aunt's son, because of what happened. Oh, wow. Gross. Yeah. At that point is when you just wash it off, say, I have anything to do with you, okay, because this is another one of those, shh, keep it in the family, don't air the dirty laundry. Well, he might have molested her, but he did such a good job doing it, my beautiful son husband. How horrible. Around the same time, my grandmother drove to our house because my other cousin, Katrina, my aunt's daughter, was living with us for reasons I'll omit since it'll make the letter too long. It was early in the morning and I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I remember being terrified that someone would hear me trying to eavesdrop. Katrina told me years later that Grandma had given her an ultimatum. You're either a Wilson, her father's last name, or you're a Williams, our family's name. So essentially she was trying to disown both my aunt's children, even though she was a little more lenient with Katrina. I don't know why she was more lenient with her, because she was hoping she would be able to bully her into rejecting her family. That's why. Because the more people's out of her control, the more people that are going to spread the truth around. Fast forward to the early 90s. My grandfather passed away. Right after he died, my father went on a quick business trip, and by the time he got back, my uncle and my cousin Andrew had convinced my grandmother to change the will. My uncle and my cousin, the one who molested the little girl, got all of the houses, the land, and whatever else my grandparents had. Within a couple weeks, she bought a smaller house and moved back to town, as their house was out in the country and she probably didn't want to be alone. There were a few altercations. My father said his last words to my grandmother, and they never spoke again. She lived for another 20-something years and despised my parents. To this day, almost 30 years later, my father, his arch enemies with... To this day, almost 30 years later, my father is arch enemies with his brother and my cousin over the loss of the money, the assets, and the will. Well, it's also the reason why. Because she's protecting a fucking pedophile that raped other members of the goddamn family. Your father did the right thing, and he has a right to be bitter about it, but you can't take that money. That's fucking blood money. He struggled financially after that. Life was harder. He no longer had the backing of my grandparents, but he did okay. He had his own talents and hobbies he makes extra money from. My parents make decent financial decisions, and he retired with a small state pension. The last time I visited my aunt, I explained to the best of my ability about the golden child and scapegoat concepts. I wanted to make the dynamic make sense to her. I wanted to relieve some of her pain from everything she went through. I wanted her to understand she wasn't she wasn't at fault, and her parents' mental illness and the sibling flying monkeys were to blame, because she never understood why she was treated this way. She told me even though my uncle got everything, my father was the favorite child for many years growing up. She didn't know why that changed. Maybe your aunt has it wrong. Because it's possible your aunt just has it wrong. because she's been so abused by your grandmother. She'll believe anything your grandmother says. Oh, he was my favorite and I cut him out. Bullshit. Bullshit. That pedophile was her favorite. Period. Period. And the fact that you're keeping them anonymous after you're letting this fucking pedo get away with it and suck up all the money, you should be exposing him. And it's not even exposure. If he went to prison, it's public record. You should be humiliating your grandmother. You should be humiliating your fucking uncle. It's like, she's got this property because my grandmother decided to fucking take the side of a pedophile who raped his own family members. Blood money. Blood money. My grandmother eventually lost all her faculties, and my uncle and his second wife, a woman my grandmother hated and made fun of their entire marriage, moved into their home. They wouldn't let anyone visit my mother. They wouldn't let anyone visit, and my mother eventually called adult services for my great aunt, my grandmother's only living sister, to see if they could help her schedule a time to visit my grandmother in my uncle's home. My uncle did not put up a fight and let her visit. My great aunt made the comment that my grandmother said they wouldn't let her go anywhere or see anyone. They eventually put her in a nursing home, I assume, when her needs became too great for them to handle. When her needs became too great for them to handle. When she died, they buried her in the family plot of my uncle's second wife, the woman my grandmother hated. They did not give her a headstone. Her grave was unmarked for years. My aunt on my uncle's side started asking my cousin Andrew at church, yes, he goes to church, why my grandmother still did not have a gravestone. He finally put a concrete bench with some kind of engraving over her grave. Can you imagine all that money, over $1 million in the bank at one time, several houses, several cars, lots of property, and being buried in the family plot of a woman you hate and don't even get a headstone? And when you finally do get a marker, it's a concrete bench with an engraving and probably costs nothing compared to the price of the actual headstone. So she got exactly what she deserved. She made her bed. Now she can lie in it. She chose to go with the pedophile rapist and give her everything because that was her son husband, and he did exactly what he was going to do. You made your you made your deal with the devil. Well, this is what you get. This is what you get. Good. She deserved it, and she deserved to die the way she did. She didn't deserve the great end. She deserved everything she had. She had coming to her. My questions are, am I correct? The uncle was the son husband. Yes. Yes. Considering my uncle and his son, my cousin Andrew, who molested a little girl, and my uncle's youngest son by the second wife, all had serious drug and alcohol issues. His daughter never had any drug or alcohol issues, and no one else in the family has any drug or alcohol issues. Do you think there was some kind of sexual abuse of my uncle in his youth? I hate to say it, possibly by my grandmother. Yeah, of course. Of course. Of course, just has to be one of those things, or am I overthinking it? No, I'm sure that's what went on. Sure, that's what happened. Are there any other dynamics I'm probably overlooking in this history that are noteworthy? Yeah, the dynamic you're overlooking is that your aunt has the relationship with your uncle and your father all wrong. And she has her own dynamic with her mother all wrong because she doesn't understand it, because your aunt was destroyed by your mother, by your grandmother since birth, because that was her direct competition. Direct competition to whom, might you ask? For the son husband, for the brothers, because your grandmother's a sick bitch. Your grandmother actually enjoyed watching other girls get molested in the family because she hates other women. She sees them all as competition. She'd rather, and as long as her little progeny is doing it, oh, what a good boy. What a good boy. What a good boy. He knows how to molest family members better than, and don't you say otherwise. That's the mentality. Thank you for your input. I will send the donation now, and I will write part 2, my upbringing, in the second email, and send the second donation separately. Sincerely, Anonymous. Well, Anonymous, I look forward to your second email, okay? Because you got a sick family dynamic here, okay? This is another borderline mother destroying everything she touches. Destroying everything she touches. And look, when she dies and when she gets what she has coming to her, enjoy it. When she died, how she died, because she died how she died, she brought that on herself. Brings it all on themselves. They make their bed, let them die in it. Bottom line. So, hope that helps. Thank you so much for your contribution and story, Anonymous. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any opinions or advice in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover, something you'd like me to expose, you'd like to set up a Skype phone call, have a private video made, you'd like to sponsor a video like this for someone who needs help and can't afford it, or just make a contribution to the channel in general to keep it supported, growing, and successful. Because this channel survives 100% on contributions from all of you. Without you guys, all of this goes away. So if you like what you see here and you want to see more videos like this, you know what to do with the PayPal and email links in the description box. Also, please like and share this video wherever you can. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and be sure to click the subscription bell to be notified of all my video uploads. I'm Ollie Matthews. This has been Refuge from Narcissism. Take care.